Personal capital, free tool. Categories and tags for expense items. Remove the cap on your capital by using personal capital, free tool. Here we are in our personal capital practice file. In a prior presentation, we linked to financial institutions in order to pull in information. So we have some test data to be testing with. Then we're thinking about taking that information and seeing if we can create an income statement with it. Our objective in the practice problem, thinking about an income statement we may be using in order to create, say, a tax return, a Schedule C type of business, noting that this is not the area where personal capital typically shines, creating an income statement for business purposes. That is where something like a QuickBooks typically shines, or some other accounting software. However, if you use something like a QuickBooks, I'm jumping over to QuickBooks here, we noted that you still have to basically import the data, and you'd have to basically categorize the data in a similar way. We're looking at the pros and cons of the categorization process at this point in time. Also note that if you're thinking about a QuickBooks type of software, then we're focusing mainly on the business side of things as opposed to our finances as a whole. Within personal capital, we're probably looking at our finances as a whole, or actually focusing more on the personal side of things, and then may be able to use it to carve out what we need for an income statement. So that's our objective at this time. We're looking at then the categories of accounts, and we can find the account information by going to individual accounts on the left-hand side to take a look at the register in order to categorize them. We could go, as we will do again here, to the overview up top, and then the transactions, which will kind of combine the accounts together, which is one of the major purposes for using personal capital, is that it can then take multiple transactions from multiple areas. When thinking about compiling an income statement, we're typically thinking checking accounts and possibly credit card accounts, which have the activity in them. We may have multiple ones that we need to draw from in order to pull out, say, the business data. Then once we have this information, we can go to the banking and the cash flow information, which will, once categorized, give us a better indication of like the cash flow for income and expenses, which we may be able to then use to export to Excel and construct an income statement. So the categorization is the difficult part most of the time. I'm going to go to the overview and then the transaction information. And then I'm going to close out our window on the left-hand side, remembering that this transaction data, before I do close this out, is for everything at this point. If we wanted to go into each individual category, we could do so and then do one at a time, one category at a time. I'm going to close this out now with this little tab to the left. We can also take a look at the cash accounts here versus the loans, which might include, or the credit card accounts, which are, again, probably the two main accounts that deal with like business type of transactions. I'm going to sort this information. I'm going to look at just 2021 for our purposes here. If you're trying to pull information all the way back from 2020 and you're in 2021, if you had never used personal capital before, it might be a little bit more difficult to do that because it may not pull all the transactions all the way back. However, if you've been using personal capital, or you plan on using it to do the tax preparation, like say in 2021, and you already have the data in there, then it's useful to categorize the data, because it does help you to categorize the data here and put tags on it, which we can then use to group our data to make something like an income statement for tax preparation or whatever other needs we have. If you are trying to put something together right now, then you could use something like Excel if you need to pull in a whole year's worth of data. If you have a subscription model to Excel, you could possibly use this template called Money in Excel, which is another template that could be used, which pulls in typically more information in a similar kind of fashion as we're looking here. And so that is another option as well. And of course, you can download the data from a bank too, but then you're going to have to categorize it, and you don't have like the categories tracking. You'll have to come up with your own categories. So last time we looked at the category tracking for the income side. This time I'm going to sort this item by the expenses now. So I want to go expenses. So I clicked it twice. So now I've got all my expenses basically up top, and we're going to go through and categorize the expenses, hopefully a little bit quicker this time. So again, note that no matter what you do, you got to do this categorization feature. So even if you have a QuickBooks, if I jump back to QuickBooks here, you'd still have to enter the data from the financial data, categorizing it in some way. before it will create the income statement and balance sheet. However, you have the bank rules to help you out. So once you categorize it one time, it's easier to then set the thing up to be automatic in the future. But you first have to set it up in order to be automated. And you got to know a bit about QuickBooks and the double entry accounting system to do it. If I go back over here, we're just going to basically assign categories. We're focusing here on simply the income statement side of things. So let's just go through a few of these. I'm going to just say these look like transfers that are happening here, and it's posting them now, you can see, to other expenses, which is wrong because they're only going from one account to another account. So this one, I want to focus something on something other than an income statement account. If I was to click on the account here and manage the account, then we can say this is going to be a transfer as we set up top. Right. It's going to be a transfer. And so I'll say transfer, transfer. And that means it's not going to be categorized as income anymore or as an expense, an income statement item. Then down here, it's not a business item. So we could put personal or you know, it might be other or something like that. Main thing is I don't want it to be on the business side of things. So if I was to categorize it, maybe I keep it as personal just to not categorize it as a business item on an income statement because we're focusing on the income statement. So I'm going to then say done, and I'll do that with these items too. So I'm just going to say this is going to be transfer, and I'm going to say this, I'll keep this as personal and done. Notice that it's not automatically doing this for me and the other transactions that are like or similar. Note that if I was to download more transactions in the future, it may better categorize after I have done this, but I'm not completely sure on that, and it's not as easy to do as it would be if you could set bank rules to say, hey, look, every time you see a similar situation, record it the way I'm recording it now, as you could do in like a QuickBooks or some other accounting software like a Xero or something like that. So it's a little bit more manual that way. So I'm going to keep personal. And I'm going to say other, this is going to be transfer and personal and personal. So there we have that. And then this one is transfer. So transfer and personal. So there we have that. And then a payment for the credit card. Now, if it's a credit card payment, notice I'm not going to record a payment as a expense type of account. It's still basically a transfer because it's going from a liability account. What I do want to do is add the credit card itself and possibly record the expenses from the credit card so that I can properly categorize them into what we spent them on, not just basically the fact that we paid off the credit card. So these I'm going to keep them where they're at. I might go back in later and put it as personal rather than business. And I think that it's a credit card payment. Just let me check here. If it's a credit card payment, it's going to be in other and not as an expense line item. Yeah, so here it is in other. So I might want to just change that and give it an account number as well so I can break it out on top when I sort the data. So I'm going to say credit card payment. Let's do this one more time. I'm going to say credit card payment. I want to manage this, and I'm going to put it in 1006 maybe. So credit card payment and 1006. So now it's going to be up top when I sort this data. So I'm going to say now it's in 1006. And when I export it, I can kind of filter it by the number a little bit more easily. And then here we've got these items. I'm going to say, I'm just going to make this up. I'm going to pretend this is business for, let's say, rent. So I'm going to manage this, and I'm going to say this is going to be an expense, and I'm going to call it rent. I'm going to call it rent. And so done, and okay. So we already had rent in there, so I'm going to say rent. And there we have it. And I'm going to say this is business. Now note, this is one of those areas that if you had both business and personal, say it was rent on a home, and you were going to possibly break it out on your tax return between business and personal, you might just want to record it as business expense and then break it out anyways, no matter what you do with whatever software. In the case of home usage, such as rent on the home, mortgage that might be split between a business use of the home and personal, and utilities and that kind of stuff. All of that, no matter what you do, you're probably going to have to break it out because you're going to need the tax return usually to do that breakout. You can do an allocation method to split an expense up oftentimes, but I think it would be easier to do that in Excel. So I'm going to do that here again. It's in other right now. So you got the split transaction right here. That means you may be able to split it between two different like categories or expense categories. I wouldn't do that so much in this software because again, it's difficult to apply a tag because you can't apply two tags to it. But I'd like to just have every line item go into one place here. So I would then put this to one item again. I'm going to call it rent. And then we'll say business. So I don't need two tags. And then when I pull it into Excel, if I need to break it out between the two, some business, some personal, I'll basically do that in Excel. So I'll do that here too. I'm going to say, and now it's pulling this over. So notice it is saying rent here. So it actually pulled that one over. All I have to do is add the tag at this time. So I'm going to say business on the tag. So it did actually change that one automatically. So it's starting to memorize some of them. So you get some automation. If it was to download more data, maybe it would pull in more automated information. And so Guitar Center doesn't sound businessy. So then we have a payment. So if it's a payment on, say, a credit card, I'm not looking, this is going to be a payment that's going to go to a balance sheet item. I want to connect the credit card so that I can then look at the actual transactions to see if I should be recording an expense. So this is a time account. Also note that the descriptions are basically coming from the bank memo that's going to be on the bank account. So they may not be perfect because then they're shortening the bank memo in order to come up with a description that's going to be more coherent but won't have all the detail. So if this description doesn't look quite right to you, you can then go to the checking account and the memo line will typically have a lot more data than you'll find in the description. So I'm going to keep on going down here, and then let's put this one. I'm just gonna pretend this one is like a contractor, let's say, or something like that. I'm going to say this is going to be consulting. Oh, that's income. Let's say that this is. I'm going to add one and say it's going to be contractor, and then we'll say this is an expense type of account. And so we'll got that. I'm going to say okay, and then we'll say this is a contractor. And business, we'll say business here and add that. So that looks good. And then this is going to be nothing here. Costco, so we're paying Costco. Let's imagine that's for basically supplies. So if this was a personal item, I could then put it into something like groceries or something like that. I'm going to imagine here that it's for business, for supplies. So I'm going to say supplies. And then let's say this is business. And then done. So then we've got AT&T. If this is going to be a business, I'll say AT&T business. Actually, that's a brokerage. Visa, Costco again. So I'm going to say this is going to be supplies, office supplies, and then I'll say business. So I'm just going to expense the office supplies here and say done. And then health insurance. Now let's imagine that the health insurance is personal and not business. We might then keep the health insurance here, and then I'm going to put on the tag, personal, and that'll help me to kind of distinguish business from personal and kind of track out the personal information. So I'll do that here. I'll say personal. And so I could then make a personal income statement to some degree using this as well. So I'm going to say contractor, business, and we'll say Costco. We're going to say supplies, business, and then we've got, this is broker, and then down here, we're going to say contractor, and done, and then contractor, business, and I'll do this for the rest of these items. And then we got Costco again. Note that sometimes it's useful to actually sort by the description as well, so you have some of these like items together. So that's another way that you can kind of sort this and make it a lot easier, or depending on how you're going to sort it. And so we'll keep this on business, and then these are going to be transfers. So I'll keep that as a transfer so it doesn't hit the income statement. Telephone, I'll imagine that this is going to be business related. So telephone looks good. I'm just going to put it into a business telephone. And then we're going to have telephone. I'm just going to make it a business tag. So then Costco, we'll say supplies, so office supplies, and business on the tag. And then we got brokerage, so insurance, I'll keep that personal. So I'll imagine this is insurance, I'll say personal. And okay, and then insurance, I'll say personal. And then okay, and then utilities, I'm going to imagine this being business again. So I'm going to say business, noting that it might be like a home office, and I'll have to break it out between business and personal. But I got to do that no matter what accounting software I do, so I'll bring it into business first. And then this is going to be office supplies, office supplies, business. Okay, and then utilities, we're going to say this is going to be business on the utilities. And then Costco, we've got office supplies, business. And then we have the Costco, it's going to be office supplies and business. And then we've got the insurance, I'm just going to say personal. On the insurance, personal. And insurance personal. And I'm just making up these categorized. So purchase authorized. So we got these in other. I'll keep them there. I'll go ahead and say other. Our favorite category is the miscellaneous. And we'll put these in there. So we'll keep them as business though, tagging them business so I could sort them. This is going to be office supplies and business. And Primerica, I'll say personal on the tag, and then once again, personal on the tag, personal, and then Costco is going to be office supplies and business, and then we're going to say Disney Plus, probably personal. Don't use that for business much. Personal, and then Disney Plus. Completed ship, they charge me again. I guess that's personal, and then done, and then interest payment, and these are going to be the income. So now we're down to the income items. So now we've categorized basically the expenses, and now if we have the business income and expenses categorized properly, then we can go back then to the investing items over here, and we can take a look at our banking and cash flow. And that's where we'll have all these categorized in the proper location. Now, I might go back in and just put personal where needed, and so I can break this out between business and personal. Once done, then we can go to the banking, we can go to the cash flow, and then the cash flow should be better broken. Because now when I look at the cash flow, I'm basically looking at the cash type of transactions here, so it'll sort out some of the balance sheet stuff. So now that I have broken things out between balance sheet and non-balance sheet, and then added the categories and tags. Now, when I jump over here and look at the income line items, it's only going to include those that are the income line items, not including the items that are the balance sheet transfer items. So it's already cleaning out some of the data now. And so now when I export it to Excel, we can just simply sort it by the tag and by the category. And there's multiple ways we can sort the data once we get it into Excel. So we'll experiment with that in future presentations.